Welcome back to another edition of the SJHL Insider. My name is Jeromy Corrigan, and as always, SJHL Insider is presented by SGI. It has been another busy week in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, and as the season goes on, really every week is a busy week in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. But, of course, I am not alone. I am joined by our good friend, Clark Munroe. Clark, it was another great week of hockey. Yes, point at that camera. What kind of stood out for you this past week? Obviously, there was a lot of games.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last week, but obviously it was a busy weekend for a couple teams with a couple of 3-3s. So kind of just watching how they reacted to those, and then kind of the last few days just watching some of the teams come out of a busy weekend, or some teams that had some days off get back into it. So seeing those reactions and how those teams kind of came out of the showcase and now they're kind of settling back into the regular schedule of the season. There was some big games, some big wins, and some important wins over the last week or so. Some that we kind of prefaced, last week on this episode, on the show, I should say. So it was an important week. We'll have a look at some of that as we get along here on the show.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple teams this past week that haven't played. They've been off the ice for 11 days. But yeah, we're going to get to that in a bit. I will tease. I'm very excited for this episode. I mean, I've been excited for all of our episodes of SJHL Insider for sure, and all of our episodes of SJHL Weekly. But today, this is going to be my favorite episode to date because of our guest. He's not the easiest person to get as a guest, but that's what makes it exciting.
Yeah.
We are going to be joined later on in the show by the voice of the Flin Flon Bombers, Rob Hart. 25 years in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. The longest tenured broadcaster in the league. I
think he's been broadcasting longer than some of the broadcasters have been alive.
He's been in Flin Flon for 25 years. Yeah. It's incredible. Yes, there are some broadcasters in the league. I do believe that might be younger than that. Yeah. So yeah, we're going to talk to Rob about a lot of things. I think honestly we'll have to bring him on again because I think there's going to be some time where I'd like to bring Rob on and just have story time with Rob Hart.
Because I'm sure whole show.
That's what I mean.
Exactly.
We could have him on for an entire show, and I think that'd be good programming. But we got a lot to get to. Rob's coming on in a bit. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be exciting. So stay tuned for that. But we got some topics to definitely get into.
Yes. Now, this one is going to be a special one because last week I teased that we were going to have something new this week.
Is it?
So this week.
It is?
It is now. Let's bring in the hat trick.
Oh, wow. That's new.
Yes, the hat trick. So we're getting into our
top... I didn't know about that.
We're getting into our top 3 topics of the week.
Wow.
It's impressive. I love it. Wake up, everyone.
It was impressive. It was over the top. Yeah. I like it.
It was obnoxious, and that's how we like it here. Let's do it one more time. The hat trick. Topic number 1, we're going to have a look back at the last few days in the SJHL. As we mentioned, there were some important games being played. So let's have a look at the recap graphic. We started off with, obviously, games on Tuesday night. There's 3, and then 1 on Wednesday. Jeromy, I'll let you get into these here.
Yeah, a big win for the Melville Millionaires at home, 2-1 over the Melfort Mustangs. A really tight checking hockey game that Melville came out on top, getting the 2 points. Battlefords doubling up Laurent 6-3 in Laurent to improve to 8-0. And then it's crazy how a week can change everything, because last week when we were chatting going into the weekend, we were talking about how Estevan had only won 1 game. Well, now they've won 3 in a row because they had that 3-2 shootout win over Notre Dame. We'll get to that obviously in a bit. And then last night, the Notre Dame Hounds dropped a 5-2 decision to the Nipawin Hawks, who kicked off 3 games in 3 nights. So let's start out of that slate of games. I think the first one I'd like to start talking about is Battleford's at Laurent, because I was actually at that game, so I could talk about it.
First-hand experience.
Yes. And you know what? It was Battleford's been impressive all year. They've gotten off to obviously such a great start, 8-0. But, it It wasn't a picture-perfect start, I think, for the North Stars in that game. However, they got 2 goals early on in the first period. They, had the first 20 locked up. L'Orange really pushed in that second period. But the big thing for me in that hockey game that really stood out for Battleford is on 3 separate occasions, L'Orange would score. They would get back to within 1. They'd have all the momentum. And then it would be about 2 or 3 shifts later, Battleford would get that second goal restore, that 2-goal lead. It's the timeliness of the goals, and that's what, for good teams are going to do that. They're going to find their ways to score, even when they're not, playing to their potential, their best, but their depth showed definitely on Tuesday against L'Orange, and the timeliness of their goals was a big reason why that they walked away with a 6-3 win.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it here. So L'Orange got their first goal 1 minute and 50 seconds into the second. Battleford scored less than 2.5 minutes later. Then L'Orange got a goal at 11 minutes. Less than a minute later, Battleford's got that equalizer, I guess, or I guess they got the goal back. And then in the third period, L'Orange scored 7 minutes and 30 in, and Battleford scored just a few minutes later. So, like you said, it's tough when you have a team, when you're playing against a team like Battleford's is built this year. It's tough because no shifts can be taken off.
100%.
And it always seems like sometimes, maybe you got a really good shift out of your guys, and if the next line doesn't match that same effort, Battleford's has the guys to take over and get that back. They get the momentum right back. So it's going to be probably a big learning lesson for L'Orange. Again, it's early in their season as well. The young head coach currently, Kyle Schneider, is still at the reins there.
Yep.
Kevin Kaminski's coming back. So this is probably a game that they're going to look back on in a little bit and be like, okay, remember when this happened? We can't let it happen again.
And I know it's a tough stretch for the L'Orange Ice Wolves. The last 4 games, they've lost 4 straight, getting only 1 out of a possible 8 points. But the big thing is, in those 4 games, you've played Humboldt 3 times.
Yeah,
Battleford
once. Yeah,
and
exactly.
it's not going to get any easier for them because they finish off a 4-game homestand on Friday when they take on the Melfort Mustangs, who are those 2 teams are like that whole Sherwood division. And we'll get into that with Rob. That whole Sherwood division is very congested. And there's a lot of parity in that division, and we're seeing teams get wins on different nights, and we're seeing a lot of movement in it. But yes, that's going to be, I think, a learning lesson, like you mentioned, for the L'Orange Ice Wolves. But then let's go to Estevan quickly, too. We talked about it last week. They were 1-6. Now they've won 3 straight going into the weekend. And it seems like they've turned the corner a little bit. And, man, I got to say, Cam Herdlicka in between the pipes. I think it was like around 45, 46 stops, or it was 46 shots, I think, 46 or 47 shots, and then he made about 44, 45 saves on Tuesday against.
It says 45 on the website here. Yeah, 45.
45. Yeah. What a memory.
Yeah.
But the last 3 games, he has been outstanding for them, and I think he's going to be a big part if Estevan wants to turn it around and really get back. They're back in that Phi Terra division now with a 4-6 record, but if they really want to get back and defend their division title.
Yeah, and I mean, that was part of the conversation we had about what the weekend schedule was going to be last week when they were going to play Weyburn twice. And we discussed how if they can pull out 2 wins against Weyburn, all of a sudden they're right back into it. And then they play Notre Dame, they get another one. So like you said, they're starting to roll a little bit, and they're getting the goaltending, and they're getting the scoring from guys like Cade Runke and those types of players. Yep. So for Estevan, like right now, they're tied again. Now they've played 5 more games than Yorkton, but they are tied for first. And just a week ago, it was kind of looking like they were going to struggle. So it's a big stretch for those guys to get those wins.
It is a big stretch, and we mentioned the 8-0 battle for North Stars, and that kind of leads into topic 2 of the hat trick.
Yeah, so topic number 2, we're going to talk about there are 2 undefeated teams left in the SJHL. Yeah. We are 5 to 10 games in, depending on which team you are, but we have 2 teams sitting at 8-0 right now, Battleford's and Humboldt. I guess you've seen both, Jeromy, like between the 2. Do you want to kind of get into maybe how they've gotten to this point and maybe how long they'll go?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because you look at Humboldt, and I think, we talked about it on SJHL Weekly, which of course you can check on all our social medias, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all live on Mondays, and you can catch it on demand as well. But we were talking about it, like the fact that they had a 3-game and 3-night stretch last weekend. They had played 7 games in 10 days, and they came out and they won every single game. And they found different ways to win each game. I think that was the most impressive thing for me when it comes to the Humboldt Broncos. Obviously, a tight 2-0 win on the Friday against La Ronge in La Ronge. Then a come from behind 5-4 overtime win Saturday. And then you go into Flin Flon, very difficult place to play, and you win 2-0 on the road. Or not 2-0 on the road, sorry, 2-1 in overtime on the road. That's what I was trying to say. And you get the tying goal from Ethan Zilke with less than 3 minutes to go. And you just keep finding ways to win. And now they're getting a much-deserved week off. When it comes to Battleford, it's kind of a similar situation. You know, they're putting a lot of pucks in the back of the net right now. That's for sure. The other thing, too, is they're doing a very good job of keeping the pucks out of the net, too. But they're also finding ways to win. I don't think Tuesday up in La Ronge was their best performance, but, you know, when you have a deep lineup like they do, and you just find ways to win. The question now is, I think, you know, I've talked to people around the league, is how long are these teams going to stay undefeated? That's the question. They're both extremely good, and I guess for Humboldt, they're going to stay undefeated till next week at least, because they don't play till Tuesday. Battleford's got 2 home games this weekend against Weyburn, and the interesting thing was I looked at the schedule. Battleford pretty much plays the whole month of October at home.
That's a big one. That's a big one for them.
Well, I think it's like an 8-game homestand.
Yeah.
So
and it's a tough ring to play in.
It's
Battleford's
extremely tough.
Yeah.
So I wish I had some sort of answer. But you know what? One thing I will say before we get to our final topic, the 2 teams play a home and home at the end of the month.
Ooh. Sell out the rinks.
And boy, oh boy, would it not be something. That Friday night, first half of that home and home in Battleford.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
If both teams.
Fantastic.
I think we're supposed to be in Humboldt on the Saturday for the second half of that home and home.
Right.
I think we'd have to make the trip Friday. To
just a couple interesting numbers I'm just kind of seeing as I look at these 2 teams.
Sure.
Goal differentials, we talked about this a little bit last week. Battleford's plus 27, Humboldt plus 21. Next closest team is plus 6. And on top of that, Humboldt's got the second most penalty minutes in the league. Just something interesting I thought was interesting.
That is very interesting.
They're maybe not playing the most disciplined hockey, but they're winning games. Also, they're winning games in different ways. Like you mentioned, 3 overtime wins out of their 8 for Humboldt this year. So just another interesting one.
Very interesting. Both teams finding ways to win.
And good teams do.
Yeah. And the big thing, too, is I guess on leading into topic 3 is they're also getting contributions from some high-end players.
Absolutely, including this past week's MVP of the week, Ethan Zilke. Let's have a look at the statistic leaders in terms of skaters. Last week we looked at goalies. This week we're going to look at skaters because we've played enough games now where this kind of stuff kind of has a little bit more meaning. So we talked about it. Ethan Zilke leading the way. He was last week's MVP, SJHL MVP of the week for Humboldt. Sorry, he had, what was it, 11 points, I think, in 5 games or something like that.
4 goals, 7 assists.
Thank you. Yes. And on top of that, we have a couple of guys at the top of the league now on this list for goals. Stephen Kesslering and McGuire Ratzlaff from Nipawin. Stephen Kesslering, obviously, from Battleford's. What stands out for you, Jeromy, if you want to look at this list here?
Just to add to Kesslering and Ratzlaff, both players, I should say, are coming off of 2-goal performances. Ratzlaff had a pair last night against the Notre Dame Hounds, and then Stephen Kesslering had 2 up in La Ronge on Tuesday. What I really like about this list, and it's changed a little bit actually when I was doing my prep for this show, but you're seeing a lot of, I think players from different teams. Usually you see it when a team's off to an 8-0 start, for example, and you're going to see a lot of points up for certain players, but you're getting a lot of variety. And that's what I kind of like to see early. You're getting that early on. And, once we say a month from now, we're going to see it. There's going to be probably a handful of those players, I'm going to guess, are probably going to separate themselves and be further ahead. But there's a lot of good variety there. And you're seeing, some of the players, like you mentioned, you have, obviously you have Ethan Zilke up at the top. The Humboldt Broncos are rolling. The Battleford North Stars, you have Stephen Kesslering. And then even we've seen Nipawin, obviously, this year. The big thing with the Hawks that we've been pointing out with the Nipawin Hawks this year is they like to put the pucks in the back of the net, and they've done a very good job of it. They're a very explosive, offensive team. Yeah. So it really doesn't surprise me that they have a couple of guys up there when it comes to scoring this year. And then, obviously, Noah Wills has been so impressive. He was so impressive last year for the Melville Millionaires, and he's only going to be more impressive this year for Melville. Yeah. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at the beginning of the year at for the first episode of SJHL Weekly, I think he was the player I picked to finish the
he was in that conversation
with leading points.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of still sticking with that because he has such an impressive skill set, and other than the showcase, I haven't been out to Melville yet this year to see him play, so I'm trying to get there as soon as possible.
Yeah, we gotta get there.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But I think there's a lot of great offensive talent in the SJHL right now in the top 10 that we put up on the board. But then I still think, too, there's a lot of players that are in that top 10, or that aren't in that top 10, I should say, that we talked about at the beginning of the season that I think we expect to be in the upper echelon of scoring when all is said
and it's early enough that those guys could get hot for a week and all of a sudden they're at the top.
And injuries play a factor and everything like that.
Yeah.
Like Ben Tkachuk and Melford.
Right,
like
sure.
I fully think he's going to be one of the best players in the league, but obviously we don't know if how he's doing health wise. I wasn't sure actually. I forgot to look if he was back in the lineup on Tuesday.
I don't think so, but I could be wrong as well. So we'd have to check on that.
We'll have to check on that.
One last stat for you, Jeromy, before we move on here.
Sounds good.
Second place, obviously we talked about Noah Wills. He's second in scoring right now, but he's leading the league in points per game. So a little interesting note there. In terms of points per game, he's at the top. So Noah Wills off to a really good start. And on top of that, you mentioned injuries. Nicholas Sampson from Melville. He's only played one game. So he's another guy for that team who I think they're going to rely on for some numbers. He's only played one game so far. So let's let him get back into the lineup and see how it goes.
And Tkachuk didn't play. I just pulled it up on. So that's another player that we fully expect to be in the top 10 this season for scoring. But at the end of the day, comes down to great depth in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, and we're going to see great players for sure. So that is the hat trick for this week on SJHL Insiders. Well, we were supposed to have Rob Hart, the voice of the Flin Flon Bombers, on, but unfortunately due to technical difficulties, technology, it's something these days, I tell you, but unfortunately due to technical difficulties, Rob isn't going to be on the show this week, unfortunately, but that just comes as a nice little tease for the future, Clark. Ooh. So that's I guess the good news of it. We're really hyping Rob up. But even though Rob's not going to be on the program this week, we're going to talk Flin Flon, because not only has Flin Flon been busy on the ice, they've been playing some good hockey, they've also been very busy. But let's start on the ice first. A 4-1-1-1 start to the year. They're currently sitting at the top of the Sherwood division. You know, at the beginning of the year, I think there was, after the first 3 games, they'd only scored 5 goals. I think there was a bit of a concern about where they were going to get their goals coming from. But really, it was that trip to Warman that kind of turned everything around for them, because during that trip to Warman, they scored 9 goals in 2 games, and they've been playing much better since. And as a result, they've gotten points in every game this year except for the one game that they lost in Nipawin during the Hawks home opener, losing that game 5-2. But they've been playing some really good hockey right now, and you have to look at the Flin Flon Bombers. You know, at the beginning of the year, we were talking about Flin Flon as being one of the favorites probably in the Sherwood division. And early on, you kind of have to say they still are going to be one of those top teams in that division. So not
only are they playing pretty solid lately, they've made some moves off the ice as well, which we'll touch on in a second. They currently, they're one of the more disciplined teams in the league. I'm just, looking at their roster. They're playing very clean hockey, only 104 penalty minutes, which is tied for the least in the league. So they're staying out of the penalty box, which is key in this league. And they're starting to kind of maybe find that goal-scoring touch. They're adding some players here and there to maybe fill in some holes that they maybe thought they had. And again, we can talk about they've made 3 moves now, or 3 additions, 3 changes in the last few days. And they're going to. It's probably going to change the outlook of their roster night in and night out a little bit. Do you want to get into that now? The roster moves?
I was going to say the one thing I want to touch on before we get to those roster moves is a roster move they made in the offseason that's really not even the offseason. It was made in the preseason. That's paid dividends. And we talked about it a few times on SJHL Weekly, and I really wanted to get Rob's opinion on this, but from what I've seen, I think that trade to acquire Harmon Laser-Hume from the Nipawin Hawks, what a move. The head coach and GM Mike Reagan. As you know, Laser Hume's been one of the top goalies early on here in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League season. He's been rock solid in between the pipes for Flin Flon. And I don't think you can ask for much more out of a goaltender. Obviously, it was going to be a tall task for whoever was going to start for Flin Flon this year, coming in after Cal Shell. But, I mean, look at Laser Hume and his numbers so far this season. We talked about the goaltending last week, but he's been rock solid in between the pipes. And to have a solid goaltender in net, a team that plays great structure.
Yeah, that's important.
You're always going to be in every hockey game. And quite frankly, they were only 2 minutes and 45 seconds away from handing Humboldt their first loss of the season.
Yeah.
So they're right there.
Yeah, and I mean,
they're right there as one of the top teams in this league. That's my opinion.
For sure. And just to nail that home, a 180 goals against, 942 save percentage.
Unreal.
He's got a shutout. He's played 6 of the 7 games for the Bombers so far. And I don't know, does it seem like maybe he's got a little chip on his shoulder? I mean, getting traded right before the season started to a team like within the division even, like it's kind of interesting how that all worked out. Maybe he, felt like he wanted to really show up this year, and he's doing it so far.
I think the other thing too is you have to be excited though too. I think when you get a fresh start, last year was a tough year in Nipawin. Let's call a spade a spade. It was a tough year in Nipawin. They were a young team. There was lots of change, everything. I'm sure he would, at the beginning of the year, obviously he was trying to make the Hawks to be the starting goaltender. And he got traded to Flin Flon. But while it might have been unfortunate at the time that he realized he's like, I got traded, but he's going to a Flin Flon team that obviously they lost in Game 7 of the finals last year. They're expected to be another good team this year. Could be a chip on his shoulder, could be excitement, could be a lot of different things, I'm sure, going through for him. And obviously for the Bombers, they have to be thrilled in between the pipes. And I remember talking to Mike Reagan at the showcase. He said, he was like, as soon as he became available, we wanted to get right on it. And they did. And it's been a great move and a great transaction for Flin Flon so far this year. And we'll see if that continues down the stretch. But you touched on, obviously they've been very busy the last week. Actually, really the last 48 hours or so.
Yeah.
Let's start with the big one. Getting Alex von Spraken from the Estevan Bruins. That's it was interesting because I got word of that trade late Monday night. It was announced Tuesday morning. I was driving to L'Orange. It was interesting to read all the, reaction. The reaction to that trade. I think it's always a tough trade to make when it is a player playing for a team and the player is from the hometown.
Yeah.
Von Spraken is from Estevan and fan favorite, great kid, great hockey player.
Has
obviously
been with Estevan for parts of 5 seasons.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that was not an easy trade for head coach and GM Jason Tatarnic to make. I briefly listened to the interview that Nolan Kowal did with Jason, and it's a tough one. That's definitely a tough one for Estevan, but for Flin Flon, you're getting a great defenseman, great 20-year-old defenseman to come in, and I thought they already had a rock-solid blue line, and now you add Von Spraken to the mix, and they're going to be a very tough team to play against, especially in the Whit.
Yeah.
Especially in the Whitney Forum.
They're going to love him there. He plays a physical game. Got 19 points last year in 48 games played, 130 penalty minutes. So he likes to get in there and mix it up a little bit. Kind of just like what the Bombers are usually good at. They're good at, when you play in the Whitney Forum. It's easy to get off your game because there's so many atmospherical factors that happen in that rink. And if you can have a couple of guys that are maybe a little pesky out there, it just drives home what Bomber hockey really is.
It is actually, I'm going to quote Kyle Schneider from the L'Orange Ice Wolves when I chatted with him prior to their game on Tuesday. He made a great point about the Sherwood division. He said, L'Orange's rink, small and cold.
Yeah.
Flin Flon.
Ice surface, small.
Yes.
Yeah.
Flin Flon, small and cold. Nipawin, small and cold.
Yeah.
Melfort, big and hot.
Big and hot.
But as a result, it's always a very tough division for teams to go play in on the road.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's all those rinks are definitely tough home ice advantages, or are big home ice advantages, I should say, for those teams. And I think Von Sprecken's going to be a really great addition for them.
Yeah, to add, and they're coming off of Defenseman of the Week performance by Reese Richmond.
Yes,
so
too,
like
yeah.
They're adding to that blue line. And they made a couple other changes as well.
Yeah, and then I think the other one that really stands out too, obviously, is they get Jacob Vockler back from the NAHL. That was announced Wednesday morning. And I think, he had 38 points in 52 games last year. I was reading Rob's sports blog, and he was saying, last year they thought he was one of the most skilled bombers on their lineup.
Yeah.
And for him to come back, and he's excited to be back by reading that blog too. The sky's the limit for him.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, don't get me wrong, I'm sure they would have liked him to, be wearing that maroon at the very start of the season. But for them to get him now and now be slotted in that lineup, we did touch on how the Bombers have struggled just a little bit, to score goals this year.
It never hurts to add a player, even if they weren't struggling, though.
If you can add
of a guy who gets 14 goals last year, 38 points, 18-year-old player last year coming in as a 19-year-old, and he's coming back to you guys. I mean, that's a great addition no matter how you slice it. I mean, it's going to be a really good booster to the lineup.
You add a top six forward for free.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I look at it, and that's a big addition. So as a result, for me, I look at Flin Flon. I already thought the Flin Flon Bombers were going to be one of the top teams this year in the SJHL. I think I picked them in the Sherwood division at the beginning of the year. I don't remember.
Check the tape.
We'll have to check the tape.
We'll
check the tape on the first episode of SJHL Weekly. I think I did. Because
they're in the mix.
I think Jamie took Melfort.
Okay.
And I took Flin Flon.
Right. Yeah. You guys kind of plays devil's advocate with each other. Yeah.
I was, for sure. Yeah. And I really like Flin Flon. I really do.
And one more move as well they made.
That's right.
Yes. I'll talk about that one really quick. They traded, let me just pull it up here because I know you tweeted it out a minute ago here. They traded 20-year-old forward Caden Cole to Portage of the MJHL for forward Reese Rayside. He's a 19-year-old forward. Now, at first, we were talking about this, Caden Cole, 20-year-old player, and they traded him for a 19-year-old player. Reese Rayside, the last couple of years, has kind of been bouncing around Major Junior and Junior A.
Right.
And he doesn't have a whole lot of numbers beside his name. But we did a little digging, and that's
what we do.
We dig.
Digging.
We dig. As a 16-year-old in Manitoba Junior League with the Winnipeg Blues, he put up 36 points in 47 games as a 16-year-old. And then he went to the WHL for a little bit, came back, played with Portage, put up 7 points in 8 games during that shortened COVID season.
Right.
Then got some time in the WHL as well. So when he has played more or less full-time at Junior A level, he's put up some numbers in the past. And now he's a 19-year-old forward. He's a little bit older. He's seen some things. He's been some places. This could be another sneaky little addition by Mike Reagan and the Bombers.
I just have the stats up right now, and I think the big thing that stands out, and when I see these moves, especially those the two moves up front, I think you definitely look at the Bombers and they addressed a need where they see we do need to add some goal scoring. We do need to add some offense because as of right now, going into tonight's action, Thursday night's action, they are the third lowest scoring team in the SJHL, and the only two teams that have scored less than them are Kindersley and Yorkton, and Kindersley has played one less game, and Yorkton's played 2 less games.
Right.
So, to me, they see, well, we're doing an amazing job of keeping the puck out of our net. We still got to find ways to, put the puck
and on top
in the back
of
of the net. And we don't want, we need some depth.
Yeah.
Because we've talked about the top teams in this league. What do they have? Depth.
A lot of depth.
Battleford, Humboldt.
Yeah. And actually, it's funny you mentioned that because remember when we were doing the team previews before the season started and you were interviewing the coaches, some of those coaches were saying, I really like how our depth is lining up. I like our depth. And so far, they weren't lying.
No,
They weren't lying.
Yeah, they were
telling the truth. They liked
very
their depth.
honest with us.
They were honest.
Good to know.
Another thing too, never hurts. Rayside 6'2", 6'3", 200 plus pounds.
Yeah.
Another big body forward. Never hurts to add a little size.
100%
when you can.
Yeah. So look out for Flin Flon in that Sherwood division, because right now, going into tonight's lone game, which we will get to momentarily, in that Sherwood division, you have Flin Flon at the top, 4-1-1, 10 points. And then it's Nipwin, 4-4-1, 9. Melfort, 3-3-3, 9. Larange, 3-4-1, 7. So yes, Flin Flon has played the least amount of games, but they are only 1 point ahead of Nipwin and Melfort. This is going to be a very...
next, I said this last week as well, but the next couple of weeks, we're going to start seeing a little bit of separation. Obviously, there's so much parity right now. The more teams play, obviously, I mean, that's just simple math, but the more teams play, the more chance they have to kind of separate. But when I say that, I have a feeling the Sherwood division might not separate as much as some of the other divisions maybe already have or will.
I don't think so.
I feel like the Sherwood division is going to be like this all year long. They're going to be this close all year long.
I always, you know what, as I've kind of been the first week and a bit of the season, especially this week, I should say, actually, after going up to Larange, seeing how the game was and everything for the Ice Wolves, and now getting a chance to see all four teams and everything, I keep coming back to what the voice of the Melfort Mustang said, Matt Barrett, in our very first episode of SJHL Insider.
Yep.
And the more and more I'm seeing of these teams and the more and more I'm seeing of these games, I come back to that what he said, and I agree with it. I'm getting to a point where now I'm like, I kind of agree with him. This could be maybe the first time we see all four teams in a division make the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's sure lining up that way. I mean,
Time will tell. It's early. I mean, it's still early. Like, we've been saying that for 3 weeks, obviously. But, you know, we're getting close to a point where every team has almost played 10 games except for Yorkton and Kindersley, because they got 11 days off, which we'll get to in a bit. But we're getting close to the 10-game mark.
And when 8
that's
teams...
That's almost 20%-ish.
When 8 teams out of the 12 make the playoffs, it's very possible that there will be 2 teams in the other 2 divisions that maybe they slip a little bit or something like that happens. The only thing, like you mentioned, all 4 teams, Larange has lost a few games in a row, so can they get back on track? Tough schedule, absolutely. Yeah. So
always have to mention that.
Stuff like that, though. I mean, if they can just get a couple wins under their belt too, and then they'll be good to go. So it's really interesting.
It is very interesting. Yeah. That's our talk for the Sherwood division. Now, before we get into our weekend preview. And tonight. I always keep
tonight as well. There is a game tonight.
There is a game tonight.
Yeah.
Before we get into our preview, we have to give a big shout out to our sponsors. Obviously, our presenting sponsor for all of SJHL Insider and our podcasts, which you can get on demand. Not only can you watch our I want to say beautiful faces, mediocre faces on YouTube and whatnot, the video version. You can actually just hear us and our voices through the podcast version on both Apple and Spotify. So you can download these episodes, and every audio version is presented by SGI, but also a big shout out to all of our other sponsors, that being Chevrolet, SaskTel, RBC Viterra, Direct West, Tourism Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, and so many more. We have a lot of great sponsors on our
great partners
on SJHL Insiders, SJHL Weekly, and across the really all the SJHL.
Yeah. Social media platforms.
Platforms, website.
Yeah.
Amazing partners. And it was really cool. Quick sidebar. I should have mentioned this last week. I got to meet some of the sponsors while at Showcase.
Yep.
All so nice. Great people.
Yeah. I saw your interview, great for one, with the Cantera Seeds folks.
Actually, guys, can we pull it back up to me?
Yep.
We have to give a shout. Look at that mug. That's what they gifted me.
Jealous.
Super
jealous.
Beautiful people at Cantera Seeds.
Yep.
The new partnership. Yeah, be sure to go check out my interview with the Cantera Seeds people from the new partnership. Obviously, the new Cantera Seeds Cup.
Yep.
Very exciting this year. The logo's great. It's awesome. Go check out that interview on our YouTube, sjhl.ca, everywhere. But yeah.
Social media platforms.
Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc. all that fun stuff. There it is. I was going to list off all the accounts, but honestly, you probably heard enough of me rambling here a little bit.
Check us out everywhere. Everywhere.
We'll get
all of the places.
We'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it is time. Let's preview the weekend. The nice thing is, it's a long weekend. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy early Thanksgiving. But because it's the long weekend, we got games Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Guess what? We actually get 2 days off.
Oof. Nice.
Love it. Let's start with tonight. Nipawin, Weyburn. Lone game on the schedule. Now, 7 o'clock. Crescent Point Place.
If Rory McGoran is watching, this is Weyburn, not Notre Dame.
This is Weyburn. It is not Notre Dame, as he made that mistake on Monday.
That mistake on Monday.
Which was very funny.
But
we all make mistakes.
Had to call him out.
It was good.
Yeah.
But actually, I'm glad you brought up Rory, because he made one of his last points he made on SJHL Weekly on Monday. And I agree with him 100%. Huge week for the Nipawin Hawks.
Big week.
3 games in 3 nights down south. You started off with a 5-2 win last night. They looked very good watching that game on Hockey TV. And of course, by the way, you can watch all SJHL games on Hockey TV.
Hockey TV. Hockey TV.
Be sure to subscribe.
Yep. I got the app right here.
We have new cameras getting installed in all the rinks. Anyways, we've plugged enough. Big week for the Nipawin Hawks. They get 2 big points last night. Big matchup down in Weyburn tonight. When you look at this game, I think it's a really big game for Weyburn.
Yeah.
I mean, they're coming off a week where they played 5 games. You go 1-4. The game you won was a tight 1-2-1 against Melville, division rivals, but then you lose 2 tight ones to Estevan, and then the showcase was tough. We talked about that with Nick. Mm-hmm. But this is, unlike Humboldt, Humboldt had 5 games last week.
Yeah.
Weyburn had 5 games last week. Humboldt got a week off.
Right.
Weyburn's got another 3-3.
Weyburn's back at it.
I do feel for Cody Mapes and company. Tough schedule.
It's good.
It's a lot of hockey in a short period of time.
Yeah.
But now you got another 3-3.
Yeah.
And it all starts tonight against the Nipawin Hawks, and this game could really set the tone for them this weekend, because we'll get to it in a moment. But their games Friday and Saturday are going to be tough too.
Yeah, I sometimes look at the busy schedules early, and sometimes it's good for you. And I think we talked about this a little bit last week with Estevan having 10 games under their belt already. But I think we were talking about a different team. I can't remember which one, but
it might have been Humboldt.
It might have been Humboldt, because they had so many games in such a compact time. But getting these games out early, as a general manager, Cody Mapes, for example, being one of them around the league, but any of the general managers, if you get a big chunk of games early, you really get a judge of who your team is and where you're at.
Yep, that's
you get to see your goalies a lot early and kind of see what they need in front of them. You get to see how your power play is working, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise a little bit for those teams that are getting these busy schedules out of the way early, and then later in the season, maybe it'll ease up a little bit, at certain points of the season, which might pay off later. So it could be a bit of a blessing in disguise.
It could be. It's a fair point. And it's always interesting with a young team too, like how Weyburn is. They're still a young team, and we'll see how they kind of react to having another busy schedule. But yeah, a big game tonight. I just think Nipawin's going into that game 4-4-1. A win obviously gets them above 500. Would actually get them leapfrogging Flin Flon temporarily for first in the Sherwood division. But Weyburn sits with a 3-5 record going into this weekend. I mentioned they were 1-4 last week. They're looking to try and get some momentum ahead of going into a little bit of a weekend road trip. So we'll pull up Friday's games, and because I kind of teased it already. Big busy night on the schedule, but Kindersley and Yorkton finally back in action after 11 days off. Kindersley is going to be in tough as they go up to the Whitney Forum to take on the Flin Flon Bombers. You're probably wondering why that game's up at the top. It says 7:30 and it's above the 7 o'clock ones. Well, that's 7:30 Manitoba time, so 6:30 here in Saskatchewan.
Right.
So technically it is on earlier than Nipawin and Estevan. And then, of course, Nipawin's going to wrap up 3 games in 3 nights. Friday night in Estevan against the Bruins. Bruins looking to try to make it 4 wins in a row. They're going to take advantage of maybe a tired Nipawin Hawks team. Also worth mentioning, that's their 4th time playing already this year.
Nipawin and
Estevan and Nipawin.
Yeah.
Who knew? Such a rivalry.
The battle of the black and golds.
The black and golds is battling it out. And then, now speaking of battles, we get the first matchup of the Highway 10 rivalry Friday night as Yorkton visits Melville. We mentioned Weyburn hitting the road. They've got Battlefords both Friday and Saturday. We'll get into Saturday's games, and then Melfort is in La Ronge as both teams looking to get back in the win column.
Big game there.
I guess for you, Clark, when you look at that schedule, what do you see? What stands out to you? What are you keeping an eye out for in those 5 games?
Well,
it's a busy schedule.
It is a busy schedule.
Sure.
To me, it's you kind of touched on it a little bit, the Nipawin-Estevan game.
Yeah.
Estevan coming off 3 straight wins. Nipawin going to be playing Weyburn the night before, and Weyburn's probably going to be coming out hard on that one because they also are coming off a couple of losses.
Right.
So it's going to be, how is Nipawin going to play back-to-back? On top of that, the Melfort-La Ronge game to me has a lot of implications as well, just because La Ronge coming off a busy, tough schedule. We touched on that a bit, and if they can get a W under their belts, I think that's going to go a long way for them, especially as head coach Kevin Kaminski's coming back sooner than later. It's coming up, so two more games. So I think they want to, maybe show up for their coach Kyle Schneider. He's done a great job in Kaminski's absence. So that game at home for La Ronge, I think, is going to be an important one as well. So a couple of really good games though across the board.
The two that, for me, I'm going to take a different angle here.
For sure.
For me, it's Kindersley and Yorkton. How are they going to come out after 11 days off?
Rust versus rest, right? It's always that debate.
That's one of my, especially beginning of the season. Yeah. And obviously, it's just so interesting because we brought up the last game that both those teams played was against each other.
Yeah.
So, Kindersley's going into Flin Flon to battle the Bombers. I think it'll be, if I had to say for the two teams, I think it'll be a little easier for Yorkton to get going, just because they are playing their Highway 10 rivals.
It's a short drive.
It's same with Estevan Weyburn.
Yeah.
Right. It's one of those rivalries.
It's great rivalry.
Those are easy games to wake up for.
Yeah.
So that'll be.
And Flin Flon's got reinforcements. We just talked about it for like 15 minutes, right?
Yeah. And we'll see if all of them are in the lineup Friday nights against Kindersley. But I mean, Kindersley's been in all their games,
and they've made some moves too.
Season.
In fairness, they have made a couple moves.
100%.
They've added some guys, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they come out as well.
But I also think too, you have a week of practice too, especially at the beginning of the year. If you have some fresh new faces and everything like that coming in, like that's going to be really good. And I think for Melville to add to that game against Yorkton, or the weekend against Yorkton, is they kind of want to see where they stack up against their Highway 10 rivals, because right now obviously Yorkton's 4-1 and Melville's coming off a 2-1 win over the Melfort Mustangs and are now 3-1 on the year, and have Iterra divisions. It's a little congested as well. But let's quickly throw up the Saturday games. We kind of alluded to a couple of them because we have actually 3 of the 4 are repeat matchups. We have Kindersley and Flin Flon. Melville goes to Yorkton for the second half of the home and home. Weyburn plays Battleford in the rematch, and then Estevan against Melfort. So we mentioned it, obviously, the second half of that home and home between Melville and Yorkton, Kindersley and Flin Flon. It's always interesting with those times when you see some of those northern teams, or you see games or see weekends where you play a team back to back.
In the same building.
In the same building. It's always tough to beat a team twice.
Yeah, always.
In the same building.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it should be interesting how, whoever drops that first game, how they, respond the very next night.
Yeah.
Because usually you see a big push from the team that dropped the first one.
Yeah. And with the matchup that is different there, the Estevan heading up to Melfort, that's another one too, heading into a weekend where you got some time off now. Estevan has played quite a few games already. They have played the most games in the league. So I'm not sure what their schedule holds after that, but it's going to be I think it's going to be a bit of a sigh of relief for them to get kind of done that one, almost in a sense. But it's Melfort, man. Like what we talked about them all along. They're a tough team to play against. They always are. They have been all season. Even some of the games that they've lost, it's been really close. They only have they have a +3 goal differential. So all their games have been close. And so it's just going to be, I want to see how Estevan comes out on the road in that one after having a few home games.
Well, and the other thing too is if Estevan, if Estevan wins that game on Friday against the Nipawin Hawks, they go into Melfort on a 4-game winning streak. And if Melfort, depending on how their game goes, obviously then it becomes interesting, definitely in that matchup. To add to your point, you wanted to know what Estevan's schedule was after this weekend. Well, after this weekend, they would have or will have played, like you mentioned, the most games, that being 12 games Their next game, which we will be at.
Oh.
Well, at least I will. I don't know about you.
I'm hoping to be there.
All right.
Yes.
Well, TBD. We'll find out.
TBD.
I will be there.
Yeah.
You've heard it here first. I will be at this game mostly because, the S Van Bruins on Wednesday. One day before our next episode of SJHL Insiders, they play host to the Flin Flon Bombers.
Right. Big game.
First game between the two teams that were in the final last year. First game for Von Sprecken back in Estevan.
The return.
With Flin Flon. A lot of storylines. In that game. But it's a very interesting weekend, I think, in the league.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one.
It is going to be a fun one. What are final thoughts, I guess, going into this weekend? What do you think?
I am looking forward to seeing how these stats are going to look after this week.
Sure.
Again, I love the numbers. Anytime you want to talk to me for half an hour about anything, just bring up stats. We can talk about stats for half an hour.
That's true.
So I want to see if anybody takes another step, because there are some teams that are playing 3 games this weekend, like you mentioned. And I want to see, is there going to be some separation? Who's going to have a big weekend in terms of numbers? Right. Who's going to put themselves in a position to be next week's SGU MVP of the week, the defenseman of the week, the rookie of the week, and in that sense, the goalie of the week, of course. Are we going to see some more big goalie performances? Because the goalies have been the stars. I mean, I shouldn't say that, but
no, they have. I don't.
There
think
has been some big performers.
You haven't. You're not too far off saying that.
But the top goalies have been the true stars so far early in the season. So will that continue, or will we see some numbers getting put up? So that's what I'm looking forward to this weekend. I'm going to be keeping an eye on the numbers. Next week on the show, we're going to talk more about numbers.
We always do. That's the point of the show.
So it's going to be. I'm excited to get to Monday's show so we can recap what happened on SJHL Weekly, and then get to next week where we can chat about more fun stuff.
Slight correction. Monday's show of SJHL Weekly is actually on Tuesday.
Happy Turkey Day.
Because of Thanksgiving.
Yep.
So put that on your calendar with a big red star. Tuesday is the next episode of SJHL Weekly.
Yeah.
For me, I alluded to one of them. The one thing for me is Yorkton and Kindersley coming off 11 days off. For me, that's very interesting. I want to see how these two teams are, how these two teams react, I guess, to having that much time off. Because I think at the beginning of the year, having 11 days off, you mentioned it could be really good, could be really bad. We don't know.
Yep.
I want to see how they respond, especially too, because Kindersley's coming off their first win of the season.
Right.
Yorkton's coming
Feels
off their
like
first
forever
loss.
ago, though,
and
right?
It does, because it happened on the second day of the showcase, and it was the second game of the second day.
Yeah.
Second game of the second day of the showcase.
Yeah.
So, and it was a good game, too. So, we'll see how those two teams respond. The other kind of storyline for me, too, is that I'm going to be paying close attention to, and we kind of saw a little bit of it last night, is the two teams that are playing 3-3.
Right. That'll be tough.
I want to see, because say if Nipawin can get three out of 4 points in their last 2 games of this trip, and then they finish with 5 out of 6. I mean, what a great Southern road trip.
It's almost as much as you can ask for. Like it's almost.
It's always like those 3-3s are really difficult.
Yeah.
And I don't know if fans know how difficult the 3-3s are for these teams. If a team can go down and get 4, 5, 6 points.
Yeah.
I've always thought, anything 4 or above is really good in a 3-3, especially when you have to travel. Now, with that being said, they're doing the Nipawin Hawks are doing Notre Dame, which is in Wilcox, and then Weyburn, and then Estevan. So it's not too bad, just an hour really in between each one, which is good, but. I'm interested to see if, they got off to a great start. They got 2 points last night. Even if they split the last 2, I think it's a successful road trip for them. And then on the flip side of that, obviously tonight is their second of their 3-3. Weyburn starting their 3-3 tonight.
Yeah.
And it's a crucial, I don't want to say crucial. I shouldn't say that. But
it feels like it, though. No. With how close that division is already, there's 2 points between 4th and 1st in the Viterra, right?
I'm going to say this. When it comes to the Viterra division and when it comes to the Sherwood division, with how congested those divisions are right now, I I think the games in the division are the crucial ones. That's where you're going to make up your ground, right? Yep. Those are going to be more crucial, I think, than games outside of the division. Just because this year there are less games inside the division. So those 4-point games, as they like to say, 4-point games, they're not as much, right? And honestly, the crazy thing is Weyburn's been pretty good so far in the divisional play.
Yeah.
I mean, they have 2 wins against the Melville Millionaires. They played well against Yorkton at the very beginning of the season, very first full week of the season. I think it was the Wednesday night.
Yeah.
They lost 3-1 with an empty net goal. Both those games to Estevan were 1-goal games.
Right.
With an empty netter in the second one. But anyways, it is a big weekend, though, for them. And I'm sure, you know what, there's going to be a lot of motivation, I think, in that locker room, too, especially going into Battleford Friday.
Oh, yeah.
Because, you know, they had a really tough loss to Battleford at the SJHL Showcase that they're probably not too happy about.
It's fresh. It's fresh.
It's so fresh, right?
And, you know, I think they're going to want to kind of be a little bit of spoilers. Like, I think they're going to have, hey, they're undefeated. We could be the team that knocks them off.
And that's, I think, there's going to be a lot of motivation for these teams playing Humboldt and Battlefords. I think teams are
everybody's going to be targeting them
100%.
Now. A game every night for those teams
One team. Teams are going to want to be that team.
Yeah.
Hey, we want to be their first loss. So a lot of great matchups on the schedule. Tonight's quick recap. Tonight, I should say, Nipwin's in Weyburn to take on the Wings at 7. Tomorrow, Kindersley at Flin Flon, Nipwin at Estevan, Yorkton at Melville, Weyburn at Battleford, Melford at Larange. And then Saturday, 4 games. Kindersley at Flin Flon, Melville at Yorkton, Weyburn at Battleford, Estevan at Melford.
Let's get into it.
A lot of games. That's if my math's correct, which it usually is. That's 10. Another 10 games on the schedule. If I know we like to bring up where I'm going to be this weekend.
Yeah. What's up?
I am going to be in Yorkton on Saturday to watch Melville against Yorkton. I'm really excited.
It's going to be a good one.
It always is.
Yeah.
I mean, all those matchups in that Viterra division are usually really fun to go to. I've kind of had a string of seeing the Sherwood division. So I'm excited to see. I mean, Showcase, obviously, we saw everybody, but through my travels so far, I've been to Flin Flon, I've been to Nipwin, I've been to Larange. We are dipping into another division.
There we go.
This weekend. And then we're next week. Ooh, we got a really busy schedule next week. But
let's do it.
We'll dive into that when it comes.
Yep.
When it comes to my travels around the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League and where you can see me at the rink. But if you are in Yorkton on Saturday, feel free to say hi.
Speaking of Yorkton, Connor Anderson from Yorkton checking in on our TikTok live feed saying, let's go Terriers. I hope to get some more nice pictures for you guys tomorrow and Saturday. Connor's a photographer in his own right. He likes to take some pictures.
We love photos.
So shout out to Connor for checking in.
Appreciate it. Yeah, that'd be awesome. It's going to be a great weekend of hockey. It always is. You can catch all the games. If you can't make it to the rink this weekend, can't make it to any of the games, of course, you can catch all the games on Hockey TV. Of course, you can catch all the episodes of SJHL Insider. Here we go. Get the socials ready. But you can catch the episodes of SJHL Insiders on YouTube. On our YouTube. Please subscribe. I think going into today's show, we were literally sitting at 599 subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah.
Let's get that up because I'd like to get that much higher by the end of the season.
We got to get 1,000.
But, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, subscribe to the YouTube. And, we're live, or no, we're not. We're doing SJHL Insiders every Thursday. SJHL Weekly, of course, our other show with our good friends Jamie and Rory. Those are on Mondays, except for this coming Monday. It is Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy early Thanksgiving. We will be back on Tuesday for a jam-packed episode of SJHL Weekly with the boys, Jamie and Rory, because both those guys also have games that night. So we are going to be, it's going to be a very, very busy Tuesday, but a very exciting one around the SJHL. Before we go, we got to thank the great sponsors once again. Of course, every podcast on both Apple and Spotify, where you can also get the audio version of our show, is presented by SGI. So big thank you to SGI. Of course, if you don't have time to watch the full YouTube version of our show, which I completely get, or maybe you just want a break from, looking at us, you can get the audio version on both Apple and Spotify.
You keep saying that.
What's that?
You keep saying that. You're shooting my confidence down every time, Jer.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Sorry.
I understand.
I mean, when I've worked in TV for 4 years, and I just
Fair.
kind of, it's better to just keep the bar low,
Keep
and
low
then
standards.
you just kind of then you get boosted up. It's all good. Anyways, you can get the full audio version on Apple and Spotify. But also a big shout out to our other sponsors: Chevrolet, SaskTel, RBC, Viterra, Direct West, Tourism Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan Construction Safety Association, SGU, all those great sponsors that we have for all of our shows. It wouldn't be possible without the great folks for all of our sponsors. So it's been a great episode. Unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, due to technical difficulties, we couldn't have Rob Hart on the show. Don't worry.
We'll get
I
him.
saved the questions. We got a few questions on social media for Rob. We're going to get them answered. We're going to get him. He's, We'll
get him.
We'll get him on the show 100% in the near future. Unfortunately, just technical difficulties today. We couldn't get him on the program, but he'll be back. We'll have him on for sure. He was the one that he was really excited when I saw him in Flin Flon. He wanted to be on the show.
He'll get on the show.
He'll be on the show.
We'll get him.
Anyways, for Clark Munroe, I'm Jeromy Corrigan, and this has been another great edition of SJHL Insiders.